If you're looking for someone who's going to be custodian of the business, then I'm really not the person that you want to hire for this role. I want something more than that.
What's the most important thing for you in terms of culture?
That there is a posture that we take. We treat people with kindness, with dignity, with respect, and we're here to serve the interests of the people that we interact with. To me, it's like an attribute of who you are, not necessarily a behavior. We hired a celebrity spokesperson whose job it is to kind of carry that message. When we reached out to him through his agency, their immediate response was, look, if this is for Home Depot or Lowe's, the answer is going to be no.
Yeah.
No, it's not them. It's actually True Value. And he was like, oh, well, then let's talk.
You're listening to the NEI Pioneer Podcast. This podcast is all about sharing the authentic stories of the people in our region. You might recognize today's guest because he is our 2025 Pioneer of the Year. Dan Starr is pioneering in our region as the CEO of Do It Best in True Value. Dan actually started out at Do It Best in 2005 as the head of HR. He has then let his passion for creating and sustaining a strong work culture for his company grow into his current position as CEO. In this conversation, Vance discusses with Dan his journey to becoming CEO, the acquisition of the True Value Company, as well as the importance of creating a trusted brand. If you'd like to learn more about Dan Starr or other pioneers in our region, be sure to check out our Pioneer video series, which we've linked in the description below. But for now, let's jump into today's episode.
Dan Starr, thank you so much for joining us here on the NEI Pioneer Podcast.
You're welcome.
I'd first also, I don't know if I got to say it that night back in May, but congratulations on being our Pioneer of the Year. When you look back on that, obviously there was a ton of people in that room. You probably had a ton of support from the people at Do It Best. What are your thoughts when you look back on that night?
Yeah, it was kind of a mad rush of things coming at me because there were lots of things going on, lots of different awards and things being discussed. So yeah, it went very, very fast and furious.
Yeah.
I'd never been in that space before, so it was all new and it was kind of interesting and fun to watch. And James Caan, who'd won it the year before, was chatting with me, and I don't know, just a lot of really great conversations, and I felt deeply honored by it. So
yeah, I mean, it's been kind of a whirlwind kind of year for you with obviously the merger with True Value, and then you get the Pioneer Award. I feel like it's been have things settled down, or does it feel like it's all go for you?
Things have not settled down.
Yeah.
I mean, they've changed a little bit. Things have evolved a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was starting in August of last year that really the opportunity to acquire True Value came up, and since then, we've just been on one phase to the next, but all of it a lot faster than the sort of previous pace.
Yeah.
At least it feels that way.
Yeah, I bet. Let's talk a little bit about your journey starting out at Do It Best back in 2005.
2005, that's right.
You were hired in as the director of HR, and you've worked your way up the ladder, so to speak. And take me back to 2005. When you joined Do It Best, what was it like then, and compared to how the growth has kind of exponentially taken off since then?
Sure. So actually, if I can just mention something a little prior to that.
Go ahead.
Before becoming an employee at Do It Best, I did a lot of work for Do It Best. I was in the private practice of law. So I actually worked in this building in 1994.
This one here? The first, wow, all right. For a firm here in
a firm here in town.
Nice.
Yeah, and I was a partner at Barnes & Thornburg, which is a large Midwestern law firm. When I was there, probably 350 lawyers in different states and cities, and it's a lot more than that now. So larger firm environment, and I did a lot of work for Do It Best. And I was a business tax transactional lawyer, so I did a lot of work for them, and I had the occasion to come into their building, their headquarters, and engage and work with a lot of people in different divisions at different levels within the company. So because of that, I'd become very familiar with the culture, with the people, and that, I think, made it far more interesting to me to then consider permanent employment there. So I went in to be, as you said, the director of HR, but also the general counsel. Okay. So sort of a dual role at the time, and that was, What was the question?
No, just because you joined
journey.
The journey of going up the ladder. But what made you want to jump over? You mentioned the culture a little bit because obviously very different law, and then running a hardware, store is obviously, if you can feel like polar opposite, I bet at times. So
Yeah.
what made you want to jump over into this line of business?
Well, I would say a couple things. I had a mentor who was a partner at Barnes and Thornburg who left the practice of law in 1997 to go work at Do It Best.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, one of the older partners at Barnes, and a different person, he was the son of the founder of Do It Best. There were a lot of connections to that company. And so to go work for someone that I really admired and wanted to work with further was very attractive to me. I think the other more dominant issue, though, was just the overall culture of the company. It's a servant-led company, very interesting operations. It's a wholesale distribution company. At the time, it was doing $3 billion in top-line sales. So it was not an insignificant company at the time I joined it. It was pretty significant then. And so the opportunity to work in that environment, in that culture, was very attractive to me.
Now, I'm assuming you've probably that attracted you to there, and that's kind of what you kind of tried to cultivate. And obviously, coming into the director of HR position, that's probably your primary focus.
That's right.
Is the culture and trying to, maybe at the main. What did you see as the culture? Did you try to maintain it, or did you try to enhance it? What were your thoughts coming into it, and then how did you try to put your fingerprints on it?
Well, at first, my goal was to learn it.
Yeah.
And that alone, to own it, to be a participant in it, to try to support it, was critically important. And then, you mentioned sort of that leadership journey. I went from that role to the chief. After seven and a half years, I went from that role to the chief operating officer role. So at that point, all the operating divisions of the company reported to me. I reported to the CEO. At that point, I felt more responsible, personally responsible for setting not just the tone, but the standard, and trying to coach people to it from a culture standpoint. And then even more so once I became CEO in 2016. So COO in 2012, 3.5 years later, I became CEO. And then all those people that I had admired and the reasons why I came to work at Do It Best, the vast majority of them were gone. They retired. Time passes. There's a changing of the guard, and in many ways, it felt like it felt burdensome. It felt now those people that I was learning from, that I admired, that I wanted to model myself after, they're just no longer here. And now I'm fully responsible for this in a unique way. I really wasn't. I have a great team. We have a very, very sizable team.
Did you
great
feel
leaders.
ready? Did you feel ready for that transition?
No. I mean, in retrospect, I feel like I was ready in some ways. In many other ways, though, there's no playbook for CEO.
Right.
And as I said, the most experienced people were suddenly no longer there. So in many ways, I think it's common to feel sort of that leader's fraud feeling. That what am I doing here? Why am I in this role? What am I supposed to do with this? What if I make a mistake? People's livelihoods are depending on me. So there's a lot of that. At the same time, I felt really confident. I mean, that doesn't sound like confidence. Those are questions that I think, though, everybody has. And then at the same time, though, I felt really confident that I understood the culture, I understood the mission and values of the organization, that I had a strong team to pull from, and that we had challenges that we need to get after. So I was motivated to action.
And you could probably see those, challenges maybe from a different perspective, coming up. You could probably identify those along the way, and that maybe did it make it easier to identify, once you got into that CEO, did it make it easier to attack those challenges?
I think that's certainly true.
Yeah.
I believe that is absolutely true. If I had not had more than 10 years of experience in other roles, it would have made it so much more difficult to have not just the cultural grounding, but an appreciation for the broader depth of issues that are going to come along. Some of them new, but I knew the strengths and weaknesses of the organization. So regardless of the challenge set that was coming our way, I felt like I was well prepared to marshal the necessary resources to, attack that problem.
Was the goal when you first went over to Do Best CEO? I can't imagine that it was, but
No.
did you envision, maybe someday having more of a leadership role when you first joined?
When I first joined, no.
Okay.
I thought that was a career position, that I would remain in the general counsel position. I thought it was possible that I could get to the chief operating officer role. After all, the person that I kind of followed out there, Dave was his name, he went from general counsel to VP of sales to chief operating officer. So there was a pattern of that, and I thought that was possible. It was fascinating because there was clearly a plan going on. I just wasn't aware of it. I sat down at one point with the CEO, and he was asking me we had regular one-on-ones once a month, but he was asking me a lot of interesting questions, industry-related questions, organization questions, and I was just like, that was odd. And I can remember going over then after that to the COO, and I sat down with him, and he was like, well, how'd the meeting go? And I said, well, it was interesting. It felt like I was being interviewed. And he said, well, yeah, you were. I'm like, all right, what's going on? And they sat down with me and explained those next steps, that come next June, Dave would be retiring in May. I'd be stepping into the chief operating officer role he'd be retiring in June. I'd be stepping into it in May. And they just kind of laid it out, like what was going to happen. So when I went home later on that evening, and my wife asked me how my day went, I said, well, it was interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
I was sat down and told,
I was just interviewed today.
I'm moving into the COO role next May. And she said, well, when you said, hey, I got to go home and talk to my wife about this, when were you planning on accepting it? And I'm like, oh. Yeah, it wasn't an offer. They just told me what was going to happen.
You're next.
I guess I should have talked to you about that. I apologize. She does tease me about that. That I kind of, but that was an interesting way to be introduced to the role. This is what's going to happen. Here's the plan.
So when you start as the CEO, when you take over president and CEO in 2016, where is Do It Best at?
So let me put it. It's a great question with the benefit of hindsight, right?
Yeah.
So as I said, I went into the COO role in 2012, CEO role in 2016. In that period, we were, if you reflect on it, just getting over the Great Recession. We get into 2012. Things had not really started to turn around at that point.
Right.
And so I came into the COO role and then into the CEO role with it felt like stagnant growth since 2007. That's a long time to just live in a world where you're just trying to keep your operating expenses as low as you can and remain profitable and exist without a whole lot of growth going on. That was a really tough world to live in, year out. And I think as I came into that role, the biggest challenge that I faced and wanted to see our company succeed at was a growth initiative. So I started preaching and building for growth with a couple thoughts in mind. Number one, healthy companies are growing companies. Yeah. You cannot sustain your health as an organization when you are just not growing at all. Yeah. You're diminishing, really, when you think about it, because with impact of inflation and all the other challenges that you're going to be faced with, if you are not growing and investing in your company, you are diminishing. So I felt a deep conviction, and I actually shared with the board before I took the role of CEO. If you're looking for someone who's going to be a custodian of the business, then I'm really not the person that you want to hire for this role. I want something more than that. I feel like we need to change as an organization, and we need to be growing. And fortunately for me, they agreed that was critical to our future success. And so we started doing a lot of things from a growth standpoint without knowing at the time that COVID would be coming our way, that there would be a move to a new headquarters location, that we would acquire a cooperative and then less than a year later acquire True Value. None of those things were known. What's interesting, though, is that before all those things presented themselves as opportunities, we were already going through, I would call it a change initiative. We were really trying to remove any sacred cows and strip away our game plan and build a plan for sales and growth success. And those things when they presented themselves, I think they were enablers to help us get down the road further even faster.
Now that the leaves are starting to change color and the temperature is cooling off, it is time to start checking off your fall bucket list. Enjoy a pumpkin spice latte, go to a pumpkin patch, but most importantly, nominate for Pioneer of the Year. Although we just celebrated our 2025 Pioneers in the spring, we're already gearing up for our 2026 event, which starts with nominations. If you aren't up to speed on what our Pioneer event is, first of all, where have you been? But second of all, be sure to check out pioneerstartshere.com to learn more. But in short, nominations are open for anyone to submit. So if you know someone who embodies the spirit of an entrepreneur and is creating positive change in the community, be sure to nominate them so that they can share their story. You can find the form to nominate at pioneerstartshere.com, or you can also follow the direct link in the description below to nominate. Now back to the podcast.
We've seen this growth here. What has contributed to? I assume you're probably going to lean back, on the culture. With going through all the changes that you wanted to make, and probably what, correct me if I'm wrong, kept that, through that stagnant growth, probably what kept the company most together was that culture.
Absolutely.
Where have you feel like you've made the most, impact as far as culture from when you've taken over as CEO?
My dearest wish, my hope is that the impact I've made is to do nothing more than sustain the strength of culture that we had. I wasn't looking to change that. I'm a firm believer in servant leadership. I'm a firm believer in I'll call it a lean, non-layered organizational structure where people feel empowered to go out and do their work. And I didn't want to change any of that. So my goal was to strengthen and improve the culture by as we hired and grew the company, making sure that we were focused on both hiring for culture, training, and promoting in a way that reflected that culture was going to continue. So hopefully it didn't change at all.
Speaking of culture, what's the most important thing for you as far in terms of culture?
I think culture can mean a lot of different things to different people. There's a hallmark or an attribute of an organization, what you think you're all about. It is true that we are a fiscally conservative company. I don't think that that's culture, but that is very much who we are as an organization. I think we have a family-friendly environment. That is an element of culture. We absolutely strive for that. But the thing that I keep describing when I say servant leadership, what I'm talking about is the posture that people take. And I mean everyone within the organization. I don't mean just folks on the executive team. I mean certainly folks on the executive team. The expectation is higher there than anywhere else. But across the entire organization, I think we should have an expectation that there is a posture that we take that is, we treat people with kindness, with dignity, with respect, and we're here to serve the interests of the people that we interact with. That is absolutely our member. And when I say member, just so you know, within our organization, that is that hardware store, lumberyard, home center. That is that independent retailer. There's over 9,000 of them that we serve. It is absolutely directed that way. But that posture of servant leadership, I think, applies to your coworkers, your team, the people that you're supposed to serve day to day. It applies to the vendor community, the people that we buy product from. And it applies as well to the communities that we live in, where to me, it's like an attribute of who you are, not necessarily a description of a behavior. It's who you are and what you practice then from that.
Do you feel, and I mean, I've grown up in Northeast Indiana, and so I know the name Do It Best, and I grew up in a small town that had a Do It Best hardware in Albion, Indiana. Family that ran it. I was, classmates with one of the sons, and so we knew that family pretty well that ran that hardware store in Albion, and I think it does speak to the values that you're mentioning, the family oriented, and you feel like your family when you walk in because they know you by name.
Yeah.
For those communities that, maybe even outside of Fort Wayne, but even within Fort Wayne as well, because I was just in a Do It Best. I was at the one on Wells Street a couple weeks ago, and there was somebody talking with one of the cashiers, and it felt like they had a conversation that they'd had a long time, they knew each other. Do you feel like, your hardware stores can sometimes be a part of like the backbone of some of these communities? Is that what you kind of maybe are striving for, especially in the smaller communities that have just the one hardware store?
Yes, that is absolutely right.
Yeah.
Building stronger communities is a lot of what those stores are all about.
Sorry, maybe we cut a commercial for you right there, but
well, you could have. Here's the funny thing that. So Do It Best historically doesn't do national advertising. True Value, on the other hand, has. Right. Now, they haven't done a lot of it in the last 10 years, and we're going to change that. But what you're needling there is an identity issue of the stores. Now, we serve those stores. Those are independently run organizations. But what's the personality? What is the nature of those stores? And what are they attempting to do? And that is building stronger communities. I don't know if you know who this is, but we hired a celebrity. I've never done this before, but we hired a celebrity spokesperson whose job it is to kind of carry that message. Yeah. And a hard thing that you have is finding someone with the credibility to do that and do that well. The main thing you want is somebody who believes that. I have a video from the person is Nick Offerman. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah,
Parks and Recreation.
Of course, yeah.
So he grew up in a small town in Illinois, and it sounded exactly what you described. That he knew the hardware store owner at that True Value. He worked with several of the employees. One was a woodworker. Nick Offerman is a woodworker in real life.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I learned that. You apparently knew that.
Well, I'm just a big fan of Parks and Rec, so I know who he was. So
he really did make this canoe. Did you? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
So he really is that guy. And so when we reached out to him through his agency, their immediate response was, look, if this is for Home Depot or Lowe's, the answer is going to be no. Yeah. And our representative was like, no, it's not them. It's actually True Value. And he was like, oh, well, then let's talk.
Yeah.
And part of his conviction around even doing this, saying no to others and saying yes to us, was his own personal experience, that the expertise, the business acumen, and the heart of small business and small towns are made stronger with a very strong independent store within them, and he really wanted to be part of that. Yeah. I thought that was awesome. So yes, kudos to you. You nailed the mission of these stores and really what they want to be known for.
Yeah, I mean, just because I can picture the store. I was in it hundreds of times. It was an older building, had wood floors that creaked.
Yes.
Every step you take.
A certain smell to it.
Oh yeah, of course.
Free popcorn, maybe.
Yeah. I can't remember offhand, but it's something they would probably offer for sure. But we would go there all the time. Like I said, we knew that we were friends with the family, so
they're great stores.
Yes, for sure. Was there an opportunity? Because when did you guys move into Electric Works?
Well, now you're really testing me. That was probably December of 2022. I'm gonna say, I think it was December 2022 when we first moved in.
And was the mission or was the end goal always to keep it here in Fort Wayne? I'd imagine maybe there was opportunity. I don't know if you can speak to, was there opportunity to move it away?
Yes. Yes, there was opportunity.
What made it so attractive just to keep it here?
Well, this is where our company was founded. Yeah. And not only that, the founding, but we have a workforce, a committed workforce that I think rivals anywhere. Why would you want to move away from that? You know that most people aren't going to follow you. They have deep roots in this community. I wanted to stay here because our home was here and our people are here. The challenge, and this is something that I shared at a state and local level with folks, hey, there were obstacles to us being able to stay here. My wish is to be here, but I report to a board of directors of 12 people, none of whom are from Northeast Indiana, none of whom really feel a sense of obligation to Northeast Indiana. I have to put forward a strong business case of why we should remain located here. Now, I think it's the right choice, but I need a compelling picture of that. And increasingly, our office, for those who are aware, was out on Nelson Road. In what was our first warehouse. It was no longer operated as a warehouse. I don't know if you know that.
No.
But it's a collection of really 6 buildings kind of knitted together, and it was our first warehouse, our first constructed warehouse. And it shut down as an operating warehouse in the 1980s and then got continually built out as office space, but it was not a good location, setting, building, structure, nothing for the workforce that we had really developed. Right. So that was not compelling at all. Now, Electric Works was a great opportunity for us to find space that would enable us to both attract and retain. I felt we don't have to change anything in the culture, but for quality of place, we need a different environment that's suitable to the workforce.
How has being there, enhanced, the business that you guys are doing? I imagine, being in a newer space or a renovated space, I should say, that, in a historic building, did it bring, just a jolt of energy to maybe the organization? You're like, oh, we're in this new place. Like, let's try to make this feel like home, essentially.
Yes. It's stunningly nice. I don't know if you've ever been in there.
Yeah. We've hosted, I think our rock meetings are in the big conference room there for you guys. So we're definitely very familiar with it.
You're very familiar with that first floor space. So very high ceilings, very open space, lots of windows.
For sure.
There's nothing in that you can describe and go, well, I wish I could improve. Oh, guess there's nothing. Yeah. It's all good, and newly finished space, but over 100-year-old building. Yeah. It's attractive space, and it's an open concept. So it's very conducive to collaboratively working, in team environments. That's all we have. It's been phenomenal space for us. So, yeah, no complaints.
So you guys acquired True Value back in November of 2024, so just about a year. In this last year that you've, finished the merger, you said you guys started the talks, I think, in August of last year. Now that it's been finished, what has been the value, pun intended, of acquiring True Value now that you have a year under your belt with it?
Cut me off if I talk too long on any of that. Okay. So the way that it was valued, coming up with a purchase price for it was one thing. But what is the I'll do another pun. What was the true value or the inherent value of what we were truly after is actually something different. So, let me back up. So we're going through a negotiation process. We had a full asset purchase agreement that was filed the same day as the bankruptcy filing. True Value had legacy liabilities that were killing it. It was going to run an operating loss of about $145 million in that year. Wow. It's hard to lose that much money. Yeah. You have to really try. But they had bloated organization. They had way too many distribution centers. They had diminishing sales. They had every problem that you could have. But mainly it was born of very, very significant legacy liabilities. Well, bankruptcy allows you a path to remove that constraint from the inherent business. So that was good. Bankruptcy allowed us to acquire all the assets of the company and only a very few liabilities of the company. What it was valued at for that purpose, though, was they had about 14, 15 distribution centers that had inventory in them. That inventory was saleable inventory, and they had accounts receivable with all the independent businesses that they served. That was what anybody would look at it and say, that's what it's worth, is the remaining assets that they have. That's it.
For sure.
That is not what we looked at as the real strength of this acquisition. Yes, it was saleable inventory, and we could make beneficial use of that. But what we really were after were about 4,500 independent hardware stores, home centers, lumber yards that were buying from the co-op. And they were buying about $1.4 billion annually. We wanted that strength of business relationships. Even though they were going through the process of deeply harming it, we felt like we could keep most of it. The other thing that they had that I thought was really valuable was that brand that still had about 73% unaided consumer awareness, even though they hadn't invested in it in a decade. That's powerful, because Do It Best is not really a strong retail brand. And they had a paint manufacturing business, which was another really interesting element of what they did. One of the largest paint manufacturing facilities in North America, actually. And it was grossly under capacity, but still making really great product. So those are the key things that we were looking at. But we bought it for about $150 million, took ownership of it on November 22nd, and bankruptcy prevented us. We were competitors up until the closing date. So we weren't allowed to connect up with or talk with the leadership team, with the people, with HR, with anybody until the closing date. And now it's like, well, here are the keys to a completely broken down vehicle that can't get out of the driveway. Good luck, you know. So immediately we took over, and the critical thing that we began to work on was restoring the supply chain that was utterly broken. So we had to make arrangements with product vendors, bring millions and millions of dollars of product into some distribution centers, and begin to service all those accounts in a way that they had been failed prior to that. And that was a very difficult, lengthy process to fill up a supply chain with tens of millions of dollars of necessary product with a vendor community that just, you know, is angry because they just lost a lot of money from this old True Value company. Now I need to do business with you. Yeah. None of that was easy. I give a lot of credit to our team.
How much resistance to change was there, from their side?
I think for the most part they saw it as a welcome relief.
Okay.
So it wasn't as hard a message as you might imagine, in part because they were owned by private equity, and that private equity was not transparent with them and frankly lied to them, and so they felt betrayed. Okay. Folks who had been there for years, and on the day of the bankruptcy filing, they had no idea that was coming. They had no idea that True Value was losing money. Wow. When they were told that True Value was losing a great deal of money, and that certain members of the executive team had received stay bonuses. Those are just a couple facts. I could introduce a lot more, but try to imagine you're working for a company and you just found out those things and you don't know what your future is. Yeah. So there was a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, directed not at us, but elsewhere. And I showed up at their headquarters in Chicago. This was early January of this year, for an onboarding session. We hired all their employees. They were suddenly employees of Do It Best. And we showed up for an onboarding session in a corporate environment that I'd never been to before. All of them, you know, each one of those folks, they came in for that meeting. They'd been there before. But they were being introduced to me and then to the new executive team with a brief explanation of what was going on in every single division of the company. To try to combat what they'd been through, we tried to be as open and transparent as we possibly could.
Yeah. What was that environment like when you walked in there? Was it
quiet?
Was it feel tense when you walked in?
A little tense, a little quiet. We got there and we went through a rehearsal on Sunday, and then we had the meeting on Monday. And it was my opportunity to directly address them, and then I handed the thing over to the True Value president, an executive that came over from Do It Best, and he kind of had a fireside chat with each VP of an operating division to just kind of try to give them the full lay of the land. Yeah. My comments as an intro were really about culture, as you might imagine. Yep. And I wasn't trying to I wasn't trying to dump on what they'd been through. They'd already been through enough. All I tried to do was paint a picture of what the True Value company used to be like. Because if you go back in time, prior to 2017, they were also a co-op, just like Do It Best is. They were owned by their members, and they had a culture that was very similar to ours. So I think that it wasn't an easy thing to do, but the message was clear that I wanted to convey, and that was a little bit of a welcome home. Your culture was built in a certain way by the very first CEO of True Value, a man by the name of John Cotter. I know his legacy. I know what the man stood for. It was very similar to our second CEO, Don Wolf. They were contemporaries, and they were very similar people. And I could describe him to them. Yeah. A lot of these people had never worked for him, never knew him. They might know his name, maybe. Yeah. So what I tried to do was give them a very brief history lesson on the power of what that culture had been, and what we wanted to do was restore it from that pretty nasty private equity experience that they'd been through.
Yeah. Did your previous experience, with working on mergers, when you were a lawyer. Did that help you in this process, or maybe were you too far into the weeds at certain moments, or was it?
Who have you talked to? How do you know that?
I don't know. I just read your bio a little bit, so I figured it probably had to help in certain aspects, and maybe, maybe not in certain.
It really, I would say, we went through 2 acquisitions. The first one was the acquisition of United Hardware. They were a very small regional co-op in the Upper Plains states, and I was probably too involved in the structure conversation. But based on my prior experience, I had certain opinions about the best way to do it, and we got there. I didn't countermand people with better ideas. I just had experience with this.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to work that out. And we got legal assistance and we got support from accountants and lawyers and other professionals. And I was deeply involved in it. I was the one who was principally involved in the negotiation with the CEO of United, and I was the one principally involved in putting together sort of the basic structure, but then I had a ton of help. So I smiled just because, I probably was a little bit too involved. I hope I didn't get in anybody's way.
Yeah.
On the True Value deal, yes, my legal training and experience helped, but that was in the midst of a bankruptcy, and that was a whole new experience for me. So I really drew on the strength of the experience of others. I was used to dealing with companies that are and want to work with one another, not a company that's falling apart, a bank that's going a little crazy, investment bankers that are in it for themselves. I mean, it's a chaotic environment.
I can imagine.
So that was a little challenging, but I had a ton of help.
Good. I want to go back to sort of you mentioned culture there again. You would do it best in the community involvement. Obviously, you're on some boards. You've been on some nonprofit boards as well. And you mentioned that it's important for your executive team to be out and be involved as well. What is community involvement? How important is that for Do It Best to be out there amongst the people to spread the good word about Do It Best and also build up some camaraderie around?
Yeah, I think as our organization has always had a very strong philanthropic conviction, I would say. I mentioned Don Wolf, our second president and CEO. I think he's largely the person responsible for building that culture. He had built up our partnership with United Way. He actually started the Fort Wayne chapter of the Boys and Girls Club, brought in Frank Zarelli from out of state, and built it into the largest chapter in the state of Indiana. Yeah. We actually serve more kids annually in Fort Wayne than they did in the city of Chicago, if you can believe that. Wow. He also founded Study Connection, if you're familiar with that. So it was he was orphaned at a relatively young age and grew up very poor and had a commitment as he got older toward influencing the direction of children who are at risk. So that was very important to him, and I think through his example became very important to a lot of folks at our company. So we've always had that history. What I tried to do was not interrupt that, but provide us a better vehicle from a fundraising and community engagement standpoint. So a few years ago, we started the Do It Best Foundation. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that.
I'm familiar with it, yeah.
Well, we have a couple fundraising events. Our big one is a golf outing. This last June, we had somewhere around 450 golfers. We shut down 4 courses, the 4 private courses in Fort Wayne. Yeah. Fort Wayne Country Club, Sycamore, Orchard Ridge, and Pine Valley. All 4 were shut down and populated with golfers for our foundation. We raised about $1.3 million in one day. Biggest event in the city. I mention that only because, creating the foundation and then doing things like that has enabled a much greater capacity for fundraising that takes place outside, really. We're bringing outsiders to Fort Wayne, our vendor community and others, into this community to fundraise so that we can strengthen this community To me, that's the best of all worlds. Pull money from other places into Fort Wayne and then support what goes on in Fort Wayne, as well as the locations where we have distribution centers. So part of that is about improving the fundraising. The other part of that is employee engagement. We have a grant evaluation committee that's made up of a cross-section of employees. Their responsibility is to evaluate grant requests and make recommendations for how that money is spent. That enables our team to get so much closer to good things that are going on in our community, and then make a decision themselves on where that money should go. I don't want to do that. I think it's much stronger for our company to have other people engaged in doing that. So it's both fundraising as well as financial support for things that move the needle in our community. That I'm really proud of.
Surprise, I'm back again. I just wanted to check in to see if you clicked the link in the description to nominate someone for Pioneer of the Year. No? What are you doing? Oh, watching this podcast. Okay. Good excuse. But don't waste too much time because the nominations will close at the end of October. If you'd like to learn more about the event, watch previous year's videos, or nominate someone, be sure to use those links in the description. Okay. I'll let you get back to the podcast for real this time.
What, in your view, separates, do it best or True Value from, the big, large chains? What is the differentiating factor that if somebody were to go here and then go there, you're going to, find a difference at Do It Best?
Boy, that invites me to criticize them. I'm sorry. I am completely biased. I am completely biased. There is a perception that if you go into a Home Depot, you're going to get the best price. That's probably true if you're looking for an appliance. That's not probably true if you're going in looking for hardware or power tools or something like that. You go into one of those stores and they're built to be a warehouse with very limited human support. There's very little interaction. There's very little expertise. There's very little customer service. That's because they're trying to drive both price and margin. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that is just not who we support. What we support is going back to that description you had of an independent owner in a community that's trying to make their community better. Ordinarily, that person can sweep the floor, but also has known hardware products for 40 years or so. So you come into their store and you have questions about what to buy to complete a project, how to use it, what other tools are necessary. They're there to support that. So I think expertise, customer service are the standouts. And then in terms of price, I still look at that and go, there are some things you'll get a price advantage at Home Depot, but no. Most of the time, it's pretty even. They know how to make money. That's not a criticism. That's what they're there to do. But they know how to make money. But they have a good price image because they drive it on certain things. And there's, 300 or so Home Depot stores in North America. There's over 9,000 independents. It's a smaller format, most of them. So it's a more personal experience. I say that, but if you don't mind me adding on to it, it's not always true. There's a member of ours that has a store in the outskirts of Cleveland, Ohio. It's actually in a little town called Hartville, Ohio. You could, under their roof, you could fit a Home Depot and a football field. That's how large their store is. Wow. So that is an independently, family-owned, independently run business. It's a stunning thing to see, but we have members of all sizes. You might find a 5,000 square foot store, but there are much, much larger stores out there too. So they come in different sizes, but you'd also get customer service at that store that you would never get at a large, big box warehouse type store.
Why is it so important that the stores are member owned?
I think that independence does a lot. I think that when you can cultivate a sense of ownership, that's great. When you actually have an owner who puts their capital at risk, opens up a retail establishment, and brings wealth back to their community, that's what makes that community stronger. I think the business is stronger too. I think you can have corporate stores and they can run well, but they're running off a playbook. And the decisions are being made elsewhere. I just think that is a lesser autonomous form of business that can be successful, but it doesn't have a whole lot of character.
If somebody else were to, come up to you and ask you for advice, whether it's a leadership, more focused question, business, focused question, what advice would you give, someone who's, maybe just getting their start out and they're, maybe at a lower level of a company, but have seen that, you were able to work your way up, what advice would you give to a person that's, looking for leadership advice, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record because my advice would be understand and get to know the culture of the company that you're trying to grow or work for. But then I'd always try to persuade somebody that the only long-term successful method of leadership within an organization is servant leadership. You can have a top-down autocratic style and be successful in the short term, but I don't believe in the long term that those companies are going to have sustained success. I believe the best kind of environment you can create for people would be a servant-led culture. So yeah, I'd be trying to convince somebody to do that.
Yeah. If you weren't the CEO of Do It Best, if you weren't in this line of work, and maybe not even on the law side either, what could you see yourself doing?
Not even on the law side. I have to eliminate that too, because I probably would have remained a practicing lawyer.
Yeah.
If I couldn't do that, then I probably would want to be. It doesn't come through very strongly here. Sorry. I'd probably want to be a stand-up comedian. I think at this point.
Oh, really?
Well, when your wife says to you things like, "Do you want to be funny or do you want to be married?" And she says it in that pointed a way.
Yeah.
Maybe you're trying too hard to be funny, but yeah. And of course, I always say, "Oh, I want to be funny."
Yeah.
She doesn't appreciate that either.
I can just see it now. Your name on the marquee at the embassy.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. A failed comedian.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. We'll get you out of here on these rapid wrap-up questions.
Rapid. Okay. I'll
So just either or. Coney Island hot dogs or DeBrand's fine chocolate?
I'm going to say DeBrand's fine chocolate, not because I'm such a huge chocolate lover. Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to go fast. DeBrand's.
No, you can provide a little explanation.
I have friends that love Coney Island.
Yeah.
I don't.
Oh.
I'm sorry. That sounds awful. No. But my wife, she does a great job. She makes like a Cincinnati-style chili, like Skyline.
Okay.
If I'm going to have that, she's so good at it. I'm going to have that.
No problem there. What's your favorite activity to do in Northeast Indiana?
Going to the lake. Have you ever heard that expression?
Yeah. Quite a few times around here.
I don't know how many lakes there are, but I moved here from outside of Northeast Indiana, and when people said that, I'm like, boy, it's got to be a big lake.
Yeah.
Everybody's going there. Yeah.
Everybody has a different lake.
They do. They all have different lakes.
What's the coolest place you've traveled for work?
In Dammam, Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
I'm going to say that. I went out and met with a family that was building. They built a store in Dammam.
If you had a favorite festival, whether it's summer, fall, even springtime in Northeast Indiana, where could you find yourself at?
How about Johnny Appleseed?
Oh, perfect timing as we're here in the fall. So
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for being our great representative as Pioneer of the Year this past year. We hope to see you out at next year's event. Great having you on. Definitely great hearing the perspective of the culture at Do It Best and what you've been able to build up over the last 10 years or so and what you guys have continued to do here just recently. And thank you for coming in.
You bet. Thank you.